Now, my friends, how do we remember the past? May I give you 3 ways to remember? One is write down the story. When God does something special in your life, write it down. Do you remember in Exodus chapter 17, Moses and the people are wandering through the desert and they're dying of thirst, and here's a big rock, and God says to Moses, go and strike the rock. You remember what happens? What happens? Water comes pouring out of the rock at Rephidim, right? Enough for 1 million people and all their animals. There's a traveling nomadic group of people that lives in the area called the Amalekites, and they hear about this water gushing rock, and they say, we want that rock. So they come to attack, and what does Moses say? I'm going up on the hill, and I'll raise my hands, and I'll pray. Joshua, you get some guys, and you fight off the Amalekites. What happens? Who can tell me? As long as Moses has his arms in the air and he's praying, what's happening? Joshua is winning the battle. His arms get tired. Have you tried that for 15 or 20 minutes? And he starts to drop his hands. Then what happens? Aaron and Hur come and stand on either side. We'll hold up your arms. You keep praying. Joshua, you keep fighting, for the battle is the Lord's. And you get to the end of Exodus 17 and verse 14, it tells us that God says to Joshua, write it down on a scroll so Joshua will remember this day and never forget it. Do you have some stories written down that you can pass on to your children and your grandchildren? Here's a real live story from my life and how God worked in my life in this situation before you were born. I cherish those as my dad tells them to me. My mother's been gone 35 years. And I got, may I tell you, journals full of them. And my dear daughter has said, Dad, when you go, I want 2 things, your Bible and your journals. Because it tells me the story of God at work in life. First way to remember, write it down. Second way to remember, tell the story. You remember in Deuteronomy 6 where it says, impress these things on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road and when you lie down and when you rise up. As you tuck your children in bed at night or your grandchildren, what kinds of things do you tell them about? How about telling them about God at work in your life and the difference He's made? When you wake them up in the morning, rather than an alarm clock, how about if you wake them up saying, it's another new day, and Jesus is ready to walk with you today. Let's talk to Jesus about the new day. What kind of a difference would that make? And here's the third way. I call it collecting miracle debris. I almost always carry some miracle debris in my pocket. This one happens to be a little stone. Written on one side is the word be still. The other side says, and know that I am God, Psalm 46:10. Do you remember in John chapter 5, Jesus came to a place in Jerusalem. There was a colonnade there, and there were pools there, and there were crippled people laying around. Remember the story? And a man who had been crippled, how long? 38 years. Jesus asked him, do you want to be well? Yes, but nobody can help me into the water. You don't need the water. Get up. And the crippled man stands up, you remember? And then you remember what Jesus said to him? Pick up your mat and go on home. Now, why did Jesus say that? Why didn't he just say, have a great day. You're healed now. What do you suppose he did with the mat? Do you think he found the nearest garbage can and threw it in? Not me. That was a prized possession. I think he took it home, put it right in the corner of his living room if he had one. So that anytime he had guests over for tea, see that in the corner? Yeah, what is that old raggy thing? That was my sleeping mat that I laid on for all these years. You see, I'm standing, don't you? That's miracle debris. I'm not laying on a mat anymore. Jesus raised me up, and if he can do that for me, he can do whatever you need for you. Maybe it's photographs for you. Maybe it's stones you carry in your pocket. Maybe it's a medical x-ray that you have, like my dear Dawn has, where the doctor said, you see it for yourself, this big white spot, we got to cut it out of there. And 2 weeks later, another x-ray said, we don't know what happened, but it's not there anymore. That's miracle debris. That's how you remember. Because if you don't remember, you'll forget.